In the roaring streets of 1930 Chicago, the city was alive with jazz, speakeasies, and shadows of crime. Among the bustling crowd, one small barbershop stood out, not for its decor or luxury, but for its humble owner, Tony Accardo, a man with a gentle smile and steady hands. The locals knew him as a kind, polite barber who gave the best haircuts in town. But beneath that calm exterior lurked one of Chicago's most notorious secrets. Tony wasn't just a barber, he was a master strategist in the deadly world of organized crime. Known secretly as the Blind Barber, he orchestrated heists, manipulated rival gangs, and even planned hits, all while keeping his barbershop open during the day. No one suspected that behind the scissors and shaving cream, Tony controlled a criminal empire. The suspense began one rainy night in 1932. A rival gang had hidden a fortune in a downtown speakeasy, thinking it was safe from the outfit. Tony, with his clever mind, planned the perfect heist. He sent a small crew under his command, using secret codes and misdirection. Every step of the plan was precise, every street corner, every back alley, every guard's patrol. The city slept, unaware of the storm brewing just blocks away. When the heist unfolded, the rival gang was caught off guard. Not a single shot was fired, yet the vault was emptied, and the crew vanished without a trace. The police were baffled. How could such a high-stakes robbery happen without violence or witnesses? The answer: the Blind Barber. Even more chilling, Tony handled betrayals with icy efficiency. Those who betrayed the outfit mysteriously disappeared, leaving the city to whisper rumors of a man who could vanish into plain sight. By day, he was cutting hair and sharing laughs. By night, he was shaping Chicago's criminal future with ruthless precision. Years passed, and Tony Accardo rose to the top of the Chicago outfit. Yet, he never lost the duality that made him legendary. People continued to visit his barbershop, unaware that history was unfolding in their midst. The story of the Blind Barber reminds us, sometimes, the most dangerous people hide in plain sight, wearing the mask of normalcy while shaping destinies in the shadows. Imagine Chicago in the 1930s, a city of lights and shadows, where the hum of jazz music drifts from smoky speakeasies, and the streets are alive with the hurried footsteps of businessmen, gangsters, and ordinary citizens trying to survive in a world teetering on the edge of chaos. It was a city where wealth and danger walked side by side, and no one could ever be certain who was friend or foe. Among the labyrinth of brick buildings and narrow alleys, there existed a small, unassuming barbershop. Its windows were spotless, and the bell above the door jingled softly whenever a customer entered. To the casual observer, it was a place of ordinary transactions, haircuts, shaves, polite conversation, but appearances, as in all of Chicago, were dangerously deceptive. The barbershop sat on a corner that seemed ordinary during the day, yet at night, its shadows stretched long across the cobblestones, hiding secrets that few would ever suspect. The neighborhood around it was a mix of hard-working families, curious children, and shady characters who disappeared as quickly as they appeared. To most, it was just another shop on a bustling street, but to those who knew the whispers of the city, it was a nerve center of intrigue. The city itself seemed almost alive, breathing with tension. Streetcars rattled past, horses clopped on cobblestones, and the faint scent of smoke and whiskey lingered in the air. In such an environment, danger could appear in the blink of an eye, and ordinary lives could be turned upside down before anyone realized what had happened. In this chaos, the barbershop stood as a calm, almost tranquil oasis, hiding the storm that brewed within its walls. Enter Tony Accardo, a man whose reputation was as gentle as the scissors he held. Customers trusted him with their appearance, their conversations, even their secrets. He greeted each person with a warm smile, a nod, and a courteous question about their day. No one imagined that behind that courteous demeanor lay a mind sharp enough to command the shadows of Chicago's criminal underworld. The locals often remarked that there was something calming about stepping into the shop. The chairs were polished, the mirrors gleamed, and the soft hum of a hairdryer or the steady snip of scissors provided a rhythmic comfort. For a moment, anyone who entered could forget the dangers of the city outside. Yet, beneath this sense of normalcy, unseen gears of a larger plan were constantly turning. Rumors circulated in hushed tones among the city's residents, stories of missing gangsters, unexplained disappearances, and sudden wealth changing hands overnight. No one suspected that the center of these whispers might be the same man who shaved their face or trimmed their hair. Tony Accardo had perfected the art of blending in, of being invisible in plain sight, earning him the nickname that would later chill the city, the Blind Barber. Every detail of the shop was designed to reinforce the illusion of normalcy. The furniture was carefully arranged, the floor polished daily, and every customer interaction meticulously performed to appear genuine. To the unsuspecting eye, Tony was nothing more than a skilled craftsman, a friendly face in a dangerous city. But the very ordinariness of the place was what made it the perfect cover for the extraordinary. Even the city's law enforcement, preoccupied with more visible crimes, rarely considered the small barbershop a center of intrigue. Officers walked past it, assuming it was merely another business in a crowded district. Yet, Tony knew that invisibility was the most powerful weapon. While others relied on force or fear, he relied on the subtle power of being unnoticed. As the day ended and night approached, the barbershop transformed in ways the public could never imagine. Shadows grew longer, streets emptied, and the quiet hum of the city became almost musical. Behind the door, strategies were whispered, alliances were planned, and Chicago's future was being shaped in the hands of a man who, by all appearances, was just a simple barber. The story of the Blind Barber begins here, in a place that promised safety and simplicity, yet hid danger and cunning beyond imagination. At the heart of the barbershop stood Tony Accardo, a man whose presence was unassuming yet magnetic. His neatly combed hair, crisp shirt, and polished shoes gave the impression of a meticulous craftsman, someone who took pride in his trade. Customers felt immediately at ease, trusting him with their appearances and, unknowingly, their sense of safety. Tony's hands were steady and precise, capable of transforming the roughest hair into sleek, elegant styles. But those same hands orchestrated schemes and operations that reached far beyond the barbershop. Every movement behind the chair had a dual purpose: entertain the client and sharpen the mind for the dangerous world he commanded after hours. The charm he exuded was effortless. With a polite greeting, a warm smile, and an occasional anecdote about life in Chicago, he earned the loyalty of anyone who walked through the door. People assumed that such friendliness was genuine, and in many ways it was, but it was also a tool, a mask that concealed the cold intelligence lurking beneath. Tony had a way of listening that made people believe they were the center of his attention. Customers would pour out their worries, their frustrations, even personal secrets, unaware that Tony filed away every detail. To the untrained eye, it seemed like empathy. In reality, it was strategy, learning about the city, its people, and the subtle threads of influence he could manipulate. Those who observed him closely noted a quiet intensity in his eyes, a calm, unyielding focus that hinted at something beyond ordinary barbershop work. It wasn't aggression or malice, but a sharpness that suggested an understanding of power, control, and danger. Tony's gaze alone could make someone feel both reassured and subtly unnerved, a paradox he wielded effortlessly. Friends and neighbors never imagined that this mild-mannered man could be feared and respected in equal measure by the most dangerous figures in Chicago. To gangsters, Tony was a strategist, a leader, and a man who could see moves before they were made. Yet, when he returned to his barbershop the next morning, he appeared the same as always, smiling, polite, and completely ordinary. His dual life was not born from a desire for fame or power alone. Tony understood that survival in Chicago required subtlety, discretion, and intelligence. While others relied on intimidation and violence, he relied on planning, observation, and the ability to disappear in plain sight. Every conversation in the shop, every nod, and every handshake was part of a larger pattern that few could perceive. Even his closest associates often underestimated him. Tony's reputation was built on silence and precision. He rarely raised his voice, and he almost never revealed his full plans. In this way, he became both a trusted confidant and a dangerous mystery, a man whose friendliness concealed a mind capable of controlling Chicago's criminal chessboard with effortless grace. The ordinary life he presented to the public was crucial to his success. Haircuts, shaves, and small talk were more than routine, they were camouflage. While other crime figures flaunted their wealth or power, Tony hid behind normality, proving that sometimes the most dangerous people are those who seem the most harmless. In Tony Accardo, the city saw a model citizen, a skilled craftsman, and a friendly neighbor. In reality, he was a man who commanded respect and fear from the shadows. His story was one of contrasts, ordinary and extraordinary, gentle and ruthless, visible and invisible. This duality would define him and set the stage for the chilling events that would follow. In the heart of Chicago, Tony Accardo lived two lives in the same city, yet most people only knew one of them. By day, he was the polite, meticulous barber who greeted every customer with warmth and familiarity. By night, he became a calculating strategist, orchestrating operations that most people would consider impossible. The stark contrast between these lives was the secret to his enduring power. His barbershop acted as a perfect cover. To the casual observer, it was a place of trust, comfort, and normalcy. To Tony, it was also a hub for intelligence, a quiet stage where he could listen, observe, and plan without suspicion. Conversations about politics, local events, and gossip became tools for him to understand the movements of the city and anticipate opportunities and threats. While others in Chicago relied on brute force or intimidation to achieve their goals, Tony relied on patience and precision. He understood that violence could be messy and unpredictable, whereas planning, timing, and subtlety could accomplish much more. His dual life allowed him to maneuver through danger while maintaining the perfect illusion of harmlessness. The duality was exhausting, yet Tony carried it effortlessly. In the morning, he would sweep the floors, polish the mirrors, and carefully arrange his tools. By evening, he would be reviewing maps, memoranda, and secret messages, coordinating operations with the same calm efficiency he used to shape a haircut. The city never saw this side of him, it remained invisible, known only to those who were part of his inner circle. Maintaining two separate identities required extraordinary self-discipline. Tony never let emotions cloud his judgment. When a gang member betrayed him, he would make calculated decisions that ensured both revenge and survival. Yet the next morning, he could smile and chat with the same customers, offering advice on style and grooming, as if nothing had happened the night before. The dual life also demanded secrecy in the smallest details. Meetings were disguised as errands, messages were hidden in everyday objects, and appointments were planned to avoid suspicion. Tony's genius lay in his ability to make every clandestine act seem ordinary. Even those who were observant often dismissed him as a harmless barber, never imagining that he was orchestrating Chicago's underworld. This life of contrast shaped Tony into a man who could think 10 steps ahead. While his rivals relied on muscle and fear, he relied on psychology and observation. By understanding the desires, fears, and weaknesses of everyone around him, he could manipulate situations with minimal effort, letting others act while he remained in control from behind the scenes. Yet the duality came with constant tension. Any slip, any careless word, could expose him. The city was full of opportunists and law enforcement officers eager to catch criminals. Tony's life balanced on a razor's edge, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in secrecy. Every gesture, every conversation, and every decision had to be precise to maintain the illusion. It was this duality that earned him the nickname the Blind Barber. People saw only the harmless, genial barber, blind to the dangerous mind controlling vast networks of influence and crime. The irony of the name was deliberate. He was blind to suspicion but fully aware of everything happening around him, moving invisibly through a world filled with danger and deception. The story of Tony Accardo's dual life is a study in contrasts, gentle and ruthless, ordinary and extraordinary, visible and hidden. His barbershop was both a sanctuary and a command center, and his calm exterior masked the brilliance and danger of a man shaping the course of Chicago's criminal history. The tension of living such a life kept him sharp, unpredictable, and always one step ahead of both allies and enemies alike. By 1932, Chicago's criminal landscape was a chessboard, and Tony Accardo knew how to play it better than anyone. Rival gangs constantly jockeyed for power, moving money, weapons, and influence in a dangerous game where one wrong move could mean death. Among these rivals, there was one gang that had become increasingly bold, hiding a fortune in a supposedly secure downtown speakeasy. The story of the hidden fortune had spread in whispers. No one outside the gang knew the exact amount, but rumors suggested it was enough to fund operations for months, perhaps even years. The gang believed their wealth was untouchable, their methods foolproof. They did not know that Tony, from his barbershop, had been watching their every move, quietly piecing together a plan to strike at the perfect moment. Tony studied their habits meticulously. He observed which entrances were guarded, which back rooms contained the vaults, and which members were loyal versus those who could be manipulated. Each observation became a vital piece of the puzzle, forming a picture of vulnerabilities hidden beneath the gang's arrogance. This intelligence gathering was conducted under the guise of normal life, sweeping floors, snipping hair, and chatting casually with clients, who never suspected they were witnesses to history in the making. The stakes were high. Any misstep could lead not only to failure but to violent retaliation. Tony's plan had to account for every possible variable: unanticipated visits, police patrols, and rival gang suspicion. The tension of preparing for the heist was constant, yet he remained outwardly calm, projecting the image of a barber concerned only with his craft and customers. To execute the plan, Tony carefully selected a small, trusted crew. Each member was briefed in secret, using codes and subtle signals to communicate. They rehearsed their roles meticulously, leaving nothing to chance. Tony emphasized precision, timing, and stealth over brute force, insisting that the plan succeed silently and efficiently, striking fear not through violence, but through the perfect execution of cunning. Part of the genius of Tony's plan involved misdirection. While some gang members were distracted by fake intelligence and staged distractions, the heist crew would move undetected, accessing the vault with methods no outsider could predict. Every step was calculated to ensure that by the time the rival gang realized what had happened, the crime was already complete. The planning itself became an exercise in tension. Tony would spend hours at the barbershop, his mind racing through every scenario, calculating the consequences of each decision. Each haircut, each snip of scissors, was accompanied by a mental rehearsal of the heist. Customers were blissfully unaware that their conversations and interactions might contain subtle clues to the unfolding plan. The rival gang, confident in their security, remained unaware of the storm approaching. They continued their routines, oblivious to Tony's silent observation. Every guarded door, every patrolling lookout, and every hidden weakness was noted by the blind barber. He used their overconfidence against them, turning arrogance into vulnerability, and vulnerability into opportunity. When the night of the heist arrived, tension hung thick over Chicago. Tony's crew moved like shadows through the city streets, timing every step with precision. The rival gang's fortune was within reach, but success depended entirely on the meticulous planning and execution that Tony had orchestrated for months. Any deviation could trigger chaos, yet Tony's confidence never wavered. His mind had already accounted for every contingency. The rival gang plot was more than a robbery, it was a demonstration of control, intelligence, and foresight. Tony Accardo was not just stealing money, he was sending a message that even the most secure and confident criminals could be outmaneuvered by a man who appeared harmless, a man who lived two lives yet always remained 10 steps ahead. This heist would become one of the defining moments of his legendary criminal career, proving the power of strategy over brute force. The night of the heist arrived like a storm cloaked in darkness. Chicago's streets were slick with rain, reflecting the dim glow of gas lamps and neon signs. Tony Accardo and his carefully chosen crew moved silently through the city, each step calculated, each breath measured. The ordinary sounds of the city, the clatter of trolley cars, distant laughter, and barking dogs, masked the tension that gripped them like a vice. Tony's crew approached the downtown speakeasy under the cover of shadows. Every member knew their role intimately: lookout, entry specialist, vault operator, and decoy. The plan required absolute precision, and Tony's careful training had left no room for error. One false move, and the entire operation could unravel in an instant. Inside the speakeasy, the rival gang members were oblivious. They laughed, counted cash, and toasted to their perceived invincibility. Meanwhile, Tony's team moved as if they were part of the night itself, silent, unseen, and unstoppable. Every guard passed unnoticed, every lock bypassed with expertise honed through countless hours of planning and rehearsal. The tension escalated as the crew reached the vault. It was heavily secured, yet Tony's preparations made it appear vulnerable. The sound of tumblers clicking and the faint hiss of hinges were the only indicators that something extraordinary was unfolding. Each member of the team held their breath, knowing that discovery at this moment could be fatal. Outside, Tony monitored the streets from a distance, ready to adjust the plan at a moment's notice. His eyes, trained to detect the slightest movement, scanned every shadow and alleyway. He knew that the success of the heist depended not just on stealth, but on timing, coordination, and an unwavering calm in the face of danger. Minutes stretched like hours as the vault yielded its secrets. Bundles of cash, stacks of bonds, and priceless jewelry were methodically removed, placed into bags, and moved to a predetermined exit route. The precision was breathtaking, no sound, no struggle, no warning. By the time the gang realized what was happening, the crime had already been completed. Tony's crew vanished as quickly as they appeared, slipping into the maze of Chicago streets. Each member followed meticulously planned escape routes, blending into the city's nightlife as if they were always meant to be there. The rival gang, stunned and disoriented, scrambled in panic, unable to comprehend how their supposedly secure fortune had been stolen without confrontation. The brilliance of Tony's execution lay in his ability to control chaos. Every potential obstacle had been anticipated, police patrols diverted, informants bribed, and false trails left behind to confuse pursuers. By the time anyone understood the scope of the heist, Tony and his crew were already long gone, leaving only whispers of the mysterious Blind Barber in their wake. The city awoke the next day to rumors of the audacious heist. Newspapers were filled with accounts of the stolen fortune, but no one could explain how it had been accomplished. Law enforcement was baffled, gang leaders were enraged, and the legend of the Blind Barber grew ever larger. Tony returned to his barbershop as if nothing had happened, smiling at customers, sweeping the floor, and giving haircuts, leaving no trace of his nocturnal exploits. The heist was more than a robbery, it was a masterclass in precision, strategy, and psychological dominance. Tony Accardo had shown that cunning and planning could surpass brute force, that a man living an ordinary life could shape extraordinary events from behind a mask of normalcy. The streets of Chicago, forever unaware of the invisible hands guiding their fate, became the stage for the brilliance of the Blind Barber. The morning after the heist, Chicago's police department was thrown into chaos. Officers gathered in hasty meetings, muttering about the audacity of the crime. How could an entire fortune vanish from a heavily guarded speakeasy without a single shot fired, a single alarm raised, or a single witness stepping forward? The city had never seen a crime executed with such precision. Detectives combed the speakeasy for clues. Fingerprints, footprints, signs of forced entry, everything was meticulously missing. It was as if the money had simply evaporated into thin air. The only hint of the perpetrator was a few subtle, almost imperceptible traces, easily overlooked by anyone not paying close attention. Rumors began circulating that the heist had been planned by someone with inside knowledge, someone who understood the routines of the rival gang and the city's law enforcement better than they did themselves. Suspicions were raised, alliances questioned, and paranoia spread like wildfire. No one knew who to trust, and every familiar face suddenly seemed suspicious. The police brought in experts, tried to trace the escape routes, and question informants. Yet every lead turned into a dead end. Witnesses recalled nothing unusual, and even the gang members themselves seemed unable to explain how they had been outmaneuvered. The authorities were left grasping at fragments of information, each piece more puzzling than the last. Tony Accardo, meanwhile, continued his daily routine as if nothing had happened. He appeared calm, polite, and utterly ordinary. While detectives scrambled, he observed the unfolding confusion from the shadows, understanding exactly how the law would react to the heist. This ability to stay invisible while controlling events from behind the scenes was the hallmark of the Blind Barber. Each day brought new frustration for the police. They reviewed surveillance, interrogated informants, and followed rumors through the backstreets of Chicago, yet the trail always led nowhere. It was almost as if the criminals had anticipated every move before it happened, leaving no mistakes to exploit. Tony's meticulous planning ensured that every possible vulnerability in the law enforcement's approach had been accounted for. Newspapers added to the confusion, speculating wildly about the identity of the thief. Some suggested it was an inside job, others claimed it was the work of a mastermind criminal unknown to the city. The public was fascinated, unaware that the very man giving haircuts in their neighborhood was the genius behind the headlines. Frustration turned to obsession among the police. Detectives analyzed every known criminal in Chicago, trying to match the audacity and cunning of the heist to someone. Names were suggested, alibis were checked, and yet every lead dissolved into uncertainty. Tony's dual life had given him the ultimate advantage. He was always present, always visible, yet never suspected. Even seasoned officers admitted privately that they had never encountered a crime executed with such flawless strategy. The city's criminal underworld whispered the name Blind Barber in awe and fear, reinforcing the legend even before anyone truly knew who he was. Tony's calm exterior hid a mind capable of outthinking everyone in law enforcement, rival gangs, and even his closest associates. As days turned into weeks, the police remained perplexed. No arrests were made, no evidence found, and no explanation could account for the stolen fortune. Tony, meanwhile, returned to his barber shop each day, sweeping the floor, trimming hair, and sharing a friendly word with each customer. To the public, he was just a neighborhood barber, but the truth was far more dangerous, far more brilliant, and far more terrifying than anyone could imagine. In the shadowy world Tony Accardo operated in, loyalty was fragile and betrayal could be fatal. Chicago's streets were filled with whispers of double dealers and informants, and Tony understood better than anyone that even a single act of treachery could unravel months of meticulous planning. He learned early that trust had to be earned, tested, and enforced with precision. When a member of his crew began hinting at discontent, Tony observed silently. Every gesture, every whispered comment, every suspicious glance was catalogued in his mind. He never acted hastily, his reputation depended on patience as much as on decisiveness. Betrayal had consequences, and Tony's method of enforcing them was as calculated as his heists. Those who dared betray Tony were not met with immediate violence. Instead, they were studied. Their habits were monitored, their routines mapped, and subtle psychological pressure applied. Some found themselves cut off from resources, isolated, or left in situations where their choices inevitably led to exposure. Tony's cunning lay in turning betrayal into self-destruction without ever appearing directly involved. Rumors began circulating among Chicago's underworld that betrayal carried a price. Stories of missing gangsters, unexplained disappearances, and sudden accidents spread fear like wildfire. Yet no one could trace these incidents directly back to Tony. He had perfected the art of indirect control, making the consequences of disloyalty appear random, inevitable, or unrelated to his influence. In one chilling instance, a rival gang member attempted to double-cross Tony during the planning of a smaller operation. Tony allowed the betrayal to unfold partially, observing every detail. When the moment was right, the traitor found himself trapped, his options exhausted, and his fate sealed without Tony ever lifting a hand. This method not only punished disloyalty but sent a clear message to anyone else tempted to betray him. Fear became a tool in Tony's arsenal. Not just fear of violence, but fear of the unknown, of consequences that were always just out of reach yet impossible to escape. People learned that every action was watched, every word recorded in the mind of the blind barber, and every misstep could lead to repercussions that seemed almost supernatural in their inevitability. Yet Tony balanced fear with reward. Loyalty was cherished, and those who remained true to him were rewarded with protection, opportunities, and wealth. This careful combination of fear and favor ensured that his network remained strong, obedient, and motivated. Betrayal was punished, loyalty was nurtured, and the balance of power always tipped in his favor. Even within his own crew, the tension was palpable. Members knew that any deviation from Tony's plan could have catastrophic consequences. The pressure created efficiency, discipline, and absolute focus, but it also served as a reminder that Tony was not just a man of skill, he was a man whose mind controlled the fates of everyone in his orbit. Tony's mastery of betrayal and consequences extended beyond his immediate crew. Rival gangs, law enforcement, and informants all learned to tread carefully. One misstep could draw the invisible eye of the blind barber, and once noticed, no error went unpunished. The psychological grip he exerted over Chicago's underworld was as lethal as any weapon, yet almost entirely unseen. In this shadowed world, trust became the rarest currency. Tony Accardo understood that betrayal was inevitable, but it could be managed, exploited, and turned into power. Every consequence he imposed reinforced his legend, ensuring that the blind barber was not just feared for his crimes, but revered for his intelligence, his foresight, and the unyielding control he wielded over a city teetering on the edge of chaos. After the audacious heist and the careful handling of betrayal, Tony Accardo's influence began to expand in ways few could imagine. He had proven his brilliance not through brute force, but through strategy, timing, and psychological mastery. The streets of Chicago whispered his name in a mixture of awe and fear, and the underworld began to recognize that the blind barber was no ordinary criminal. Rival gangs started to tread cautiously around him. Tony had shown that he could manipulate outcomes without being seen, and the mere suggestion of crossing him carried invisible consequences. His ability to outthink, outmaneuver, and anticipate every move made him a figure both respected and feared. Power, once subtle, now began to consolidate around him. Tony's rise was not just about eliminating threats, it was about creating a network of loyalty and influence. He carefully selected allies, rewarding those who were loyal and shrewd enough to follow his guidance. These allies were given opportunities to prosper, strengthening his hold on the city while expanding his reach into areas he had never directly touched. His reputation spread quietly, through whispers in smoky rooms and coded messages among gang members. No public displays of violence were necessary. Tony's control was psychological and strategic. Other crime bosses began to recognize the advantage of having him as an ally, knowing that aligning with Tony could mean both protection and profit. The media, largely unaware of his dual identity, reported on Chicago's rising crime figures with vague speculation. Yet none could identify the man behind the events shaping the city. Tony's careful maintenance of his barbershop persona allowed him to operate openly, unnoticed, while cementing his status as a formidable force in the criminal underworld. Tony also expanded his influence by exploiting information. He had observed the patterns of law enforcement, gang rivalries, and city officials for years, and he knew how to manipulate circumstances to his advantage. From a single conversation at his barbershop, he could extract valuable intelligence and convert it into actionable strategies, further enhancing his dominance. As his power grew, Tony remained disciplined, never letting ego or complacency jeopardize his position. Every move was calculated, and every action had purpose. He understood that true power came from control, and control required patience, observation, and the ability to remain unseen while shaping the events that others would take credit for, or fear. By the mid-1930s, Tony Accardo was no longer just a skilled criminal, he had become a kingmaker, a strategist whose influence extended across Chicago. He could broker peace between rival factions, manipulate outcomes in business disputes, and maintain authority over the city's underground economy, all while still cutting hair and charming clients in his barbershop. The duality of his life became more legendary as his rise continued. To the public, he remained the same polite, friendly barber, a fixture of normal life. To the underworld, he was a calculating genius whose reach and intellect allowed him to dominate without lifting a hand. This dual existence reinforced his power, making him nearly untouchable in both worlds. Every success, every strategic victory, and every subtle manipulation strengthened Tony's legacy. He had transformed from a skilled barber into the master of a criminal empire, proving that influence was not built on fear alone, but on intelligence, foresight, and the ability to live in two worlds at once. The rise of the blind barber was complete, and Chicago itself had become the stage on which his legend was unfolding. Tony Accardo's greatest weapon was not his intelligence or strategic brilliance, it was his ability to appear completely ordinary. Every morning, he opened the barbershop on the corner, greeting customers with the same warmth and humility as any other barber. To outsiders, he was just another man earning a living, oblivious to the dangerous world surrounding him. The meticulous routines of his daily life, the sweeping of floors, polishing of mirrors, and arranging of chairs, were all part of the illusion. These ordinary gestures masked a mind constantly calculating, observing, and analyzing. Every interaction, even the smallest conversation, served as both camouflage and intelligence gathering. Clients never suspected that the man shaving their face or trimming their hair had orchestrated one of the most audacious heists in Chicago history. The contrast between his gentle exterior and the ruthless power he wielded in the shadows created an almost mythical aura. People began to refer to him casually as Tony the Barber, unaware that the nickname concealed a legend of fear and cunning. This mask of normalcy allowed Tony to move freely through the city. While others in the criminal underworld relied on secrecy, intimidation, or hidden lairs, Tony operated in plain sight. His barbershop became a hub of influence precisely because it appeared ordinary. Allies and enemies alike underestimated him, giving him an unmatched advantage. Tony's ability to blend into everyday life extended beyond his shop. He walked the streets, attended neighborhood events, and engaged in casual conversations, all while maintaining awareness of every detail around him. Nothing escaped his notice, from whispered conversations to subtle shifts in behavior. Tony's perception of the city was complete and constant. This duality required immense discipline. Any lapse could reveal the man behind the mask. Yet Tony perfected the art of compartmentalization, separating his public persona from his clandestine operations. The ordinary barber and the criminal mastermind existed in perfect harmony, each supporting the other without revealing a single clue to the unsuspecting world. The mask of normalcy also protected him from law enforcement scrutiny. Police officers visited his shop, chatted casually, and left without a second thought. His friendliness and impeccable reputation as a professional created a shield that no amount of suspicion could penetrate. The blind barber's greatest victories were not just in heists, they were in invisibility. Even his closest allies marveled at his ability to remain undetected. Meetings were disguised as errands, strategy sessions hidden behind seemingly mundane activities, and critical information exchanged in ways that appeared ordinary to any outsider. Tony had turned invisibility into a weapon, mastering the art of being everywhere while remaining nowhere. The genius of the mask lay in its simplicity. While other criminals flaunted wealth, influence, or brutality, Tony's power grew quietly, invisibly. People overlooked him, dismissed him, or underestimated him, exactly as he intended. His ability to appear normal while shaping Chicago's criminal underworld became a defining characteristic, earning him both respect and fear in equal measure. In a city obsessed with visibility, bravado, and dominance, Tony's ordinary exterior was his ultimate camouflage. The barbershop, the smile, the polite conversation, all served as a veil over a man who controlled vast networks of power and influence. The blind barber's mask of normalcy was not just deception, it was strategy, survival, and the source of his enduring legend. Tony Accardo's story did not end with a single heist or a single rise to power. His legend grew with every whispered conversation in Chicago's alleys, every nervous glance between gang members, and every newspaper story speculating on the audacity of the blind barber. He became a symbol, a reminder that intelligence, strategy, and subtlety could wield power greater than violence alone. The streets themselves seemed to acknowledge his presence. Criminals moved carefully, always considering the invisible hand of Tony, even when he was hundreds of miles away. Law enforcement remained baffled, unable to connect any dots, as Tony continued to operate openly while shaping events from behind his mask of normalcy. His legacy was also one of psychological mastery. He had taught the underworld that fear was most potent when paired with mystery. People did not need to witness his power directly to respect it. The mere knowledge that Tony was always watching, always planning, was enough to control behavior, enforce loyalty, and neutralize threats before they even arose. Tony's influence extended beyond his immediate crew or rivals. Politicians, business leaders, and law enforcement officers were all subtly touched by his operations, whether they realized it or not. His ability to manipulate circumstances quietly, without direct confrontation, allowed him to shape Chicago's destiny while remaining almost invisible to the public eye. Reflection on his life reveals a paradox. The same man who could command fear and orchestrate criminal brilliance also cut hair, smiled warmly, and offered polite conversation in his barbershop. This duality became the core of his legend, demonstrating that true power often hides in plain sight, unnoticed until it is too late. Tony's story inspired both fear and fascination. For those in the criminal world, he was a reminder that intelligence and foresight could dominate raw strength. For law-abiding citizens, he was an enigma, a man whose ordinary appearance masked extraordinary deeds. The Blind Barber became an almost mythical figure, a symbol of cunning, strategy, and the power of perception. Over time, Tony's methods influenced others in the underworld. They saw the success that could come from blending ordinary life with extraordinary cunning. Imitators attempted to emulate his strategies, but few could replicate the combination of discipline, patience, and psychological mastery that defined the Blind Barber. His genius lay not just in the acts themselves, but in the perfection of the system he created. Reflection on his duality also revealed a deeper truth about human perception. People tend to overlook what seems mundane, assuming danger or power lies only in the obvious. Tony exploited this bias brilliantly, reminding the city, and the world, that appearances are often deceptive, and that mastery comes not from being noticed, but from being unseen while controlling everything around you. Even decades later, the story of Tony Accardo and the Blind Barber resonates. He became a cautionary tale, a legend whispered in hushed tones in Chicago, where the streets themselves seemed to remember his intelligence, his calm, and the brilliance of his strategies. His life demonstrated the ultimate lesson, that influence and control are not always measured in violence, but in subtlety, foresight, and the ability to shape events invisibly. In the end, Tony's legacy is a testament to the power of duality, strategy, and psychological mastery. He lived as two men simultaneously, one ordinary, one extraordinary. One visible to the world, one hidden behind layers of intellect and cunning. And it is in this delicate balance that the legend of the Blind Barber endures, an enduring story of control, mystery, and the extraordinary power hidden in plain sight. As the years passed, Tony Accardo remained the same to the outside world, a polite, meticulous barber, a fixture in the neighborhood, smiling at every customer and trimming hair with precision. Yet the legend of the Blind Barber grew far beyond the walls of his shop. Those who had witnessed his genius in the underworld whispered his name with awe, and even rival gangs learned to fear the invisible hand that could change fortunes without a single confrontation. The stolen fortunes, the carefully orchestrated heists, and the unraveling of rivals had left no tangible trace connecting Tony to the chaos he controlled. Law enforcement, baffled and frustrated, eventually came to see the man in the barbershop not as a suspect, but as a harmless citizen, a master of invisibility, living in plain sight. Tony himself understood that the true power lay not in riches or notoriety, but in perception. By maintaining the mask of normalcy, he had achieved something far greater than any criminal triumph. He had made a city bend to his will without anyone ever realizing it. He controlled, influenced, and survived, not through violence, but through strategy, patience, and the uncanny ability to remain unseen while orchestrating extraordinary events. And so, the Blind Barber faded into the quiet rhythm of daily life. To his neighbors, he was simply Tony the Barber. To the criminal underworld, he was a legend whose intelligence, foresight, and dual existence became a story told in hushed tones, passed from one wary whisper to the next. In the end, Tony's legacy was not measured by the wealth he amassed or the enemies he outsmarted, it was measured by the indelible mark he left on the city itself. Chicago learned a lesson few would ever forget: true power does not always announce itself, sometimes it sits quietly in a barbershop chair, smiling, listening, and watching, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The chair remains empty at times, the scissors silent, yet the legend of the Blind Barber endures, an eternal reminder that the most dangerous people are often the ones you least suspect, and that genius can hide behind the most ordinary masks.